We all have a personal history that impacts us and affects our lives. Each of us has a story, and we have a history that is both extraordinary and personal. I would like to share a part of mine with you today that is out of the ordinary for most people, and that has truly changed my life. You see, a few years ago in June, I found myself in the wake of a legal accusation, and at the hands and in the center of the misrepresentation of my criminal defense attorney in the legal system. I was charged with the crime of scheme to defraud in my role as a certified financial planner as a result of an investment that I referred, which became a scam. I actually ended up watching and experiencing the total disregard for me by my criminal defense attorney as he suddenly withdrew at the beginning of my sentencing hearing after instructing me to plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit. I then faced the total disregard of the judge in my case, who instead of listening to my requests, she denied my request to remove my plea and grant me 2 weeks to get another attorney of my choice to properly represent me in my case. She said I could appeal her decision when I got out, and she sentenced me to 5 years of probation and remanded me to Rikers Island Prison for 4 months. Now you see, Rikers Island Prison is one of New York's and the nation's most violent prisons. This was startling. And as I stood up in the courtroom in disbelief and at the direction of the court officer so she could handcuff me, I had to face the fact that this was really happening. And I had to make a decision right then and there about how I was going to handle this. Was I going to be angry and bitter? Or was I going to be open and accepting of this fate? I left behind my cell phone, my email, my computer, the people I knew, and the life that I was living. You know, I felt like I had dropped down the rabbit hole, like Alice in Wonderland, into another world, one that was unknown and unfamiliar. I didn't know what I could do, and I didn't know what I couldn't do, and I didn't know what would happen if I asked. You know, I didn't know anybody who had been in jail, and I had never been either. So as I made my way down the corridors in the back of the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse, I thought about all this. How was I going to handle this? As I encountered the first corrections officer back there who would process me, he took one look at me, and you know, I must have been white as a sheet, because he looked at me and he said, "It's not as bad as you think." What? Excuse me, it's not as bad as I think? I've just gotten sentenced to one of the states and the nation's most violent prisons, and it's not as bad as I think. You've got to be kidding. I'm thinking to myself, right. So as I went through the process back there and the procedures to be processed, prior to boarding a bus that was going to deliver me to my new residence, because I didn't have one anymore, where my summer at Rikers was going to start, I had the opportunity to make a phone call to my mother, to tell her what had happened and to let her know that I was okay. And I said to her, "I don't know how much time I have on this phone call, but I need you to promise me right now that we're going to make this the most positive experience ever." And I didn't hear anything on the other end of the phone. except a small whimper. And I said it again with urgency. Please, right now, promise me. And she said yes, she promised. Now, during all these confusing legal proceedings, I kept telling my mother and a lot of other people, you know, I feel like there's someone I'm supposed to help during this, and there's something I'm supposed to do. But I didn't know what it was. I really had no idea. I sat there and I just had this sense that someone somewhere needed my help. But who it was and what I was supposed to do, I didn't have a clue. You know, I just didn't have a clue. Now, people have asked me, how do you prepare for something like this? Truly, there is no way that you can be prepared for something like this. It's unimaginable. I wasn't ready. So I had consulted with my Aikido sensei before the sentencing hearing, who told me, now if you do go to Rikers, Jennifer, don't be your nice, helpful self in there. Keep to yourself and be invisible. Right. Be invisible. Me. Amidst all the other inmates. That was going to be a really hard direction to follow. You know, I actually know about Rikers now on the historical side. Rikers Island has 11 prisons and is located right near LaGuardia Airport. You fly over it every time. Only one of the prisons on Rikers Island is for women, and it holds up to 2,000 inmates in its facility. So when I arrived at Rikers, I actually was in a cell block for 7 days. So I had my own cell with a door that locked me in and everybody else out. And then I landed in the dormitory, where I would stay for the rest of the 4 months. This was an open room of 50 beds with no walls between them, no doors to lock, and nothing to separate me from everyone else. Anyone could attack anyone at any time without warning or cause. Now, my new digs consisted of an 8-foot pad that sat on a metal frame and the space underneath it for my stuff and 2 buckets. That was it. Everything that I had was exposed to the threats of others. Now, the person that was in the bed next to me was a lovely but quiet African-American woman who started talking to me. I found out that she was Muslim and that her name was Aliyah, meaning of the Most High. Now, you really couldn't get 2 more opposite people on the surface. You see, I was white, Jewish, college educated, and was living in an upscale neighborhood in Brooklyn before Rikers. Aliyah was black. She had grown up mostly homeless on the streets. She was living in the projects before she got to Rikers, and she was Muslim. But what we found was that we were both really uncomfortable with our surroundings, and we were both very spiritually based people. Now, I shared with Aliyah the sense of, I'm supposed to help somebody, but I don't know who it is or really what it's all about. And she said to me, well, that person would be me. You see, I have been praying to Allah to help me. I hate my life. I hate the people in it. And I'm unhappy with me. And as I listened to Aliyah, and I looked at her, and I looked around, I thought to myself, could I still be free and fabulous here? amidst all these other inmates who had been sentenced to crimes including prostitution, burglary, theft, possession of a handgun, drugs, and street fighting, could I still be free? You know, I listened to Aaliyah and I looked at her and I wasn't sure. But I committed myself quietly to myself that I was going to help her. I had no idea how. Other inmates also asked me for help. You see, Aaliyah watched me as one of the inmates came to me and confided in me that she couldn't read. And I helped her because she needed to fill out the forms that the guards had given her. She couldn't read them. My incredible support team from the outside sent me books, my beloved books. And Aaliyah watched as I received them. And she and some of the others said, "Don't lend anybody your books. They'll steal them." To which I said, you know, I just don't believe that. And when inmates would ask me about my books, I loaned them to them with the simple request to return them when they were done so that I could share them with someone else. You know, they always did. They always did. Now, I received a great book called The Alchemist, which I love. It's one of my favorites. My grandmother gave it to me the first time I read it. And I shared it with Aaliyah. And she took her time and she read it over several weeks. And it was such a joy for me to share this great inspirational story with her and to watch her enjoy it and to listen to her as she talked about it as she read it. It's just magical for me. Aaliyah watched and she asked me, and we talked about my incredible support team outside that was led by my mother, who made sure that I received mail every day. And every time I was allowed a visit from someone on the outside, she always made sure I had someone to see. You see, these visits were so important. But what was even more incredible was that my mother and my boyfriend at the time and others sent me cards and pictures and other sentiments to remind me of who I am and that I was still me, even though I was still living in this unusual environment. I hadn't lost me. Now, the truth is, nobody really knew who I was. And I didn't want them to know that I was a best-selling, award-winning author and a well-known personal growth trainer and business mentor. I didn't want anyone to know. But I facilitated exercises for Aaliyah to help her get more connected with herself, to understand who she wanted to be, and to get clear about the life she wanted. Aaliyah and I survived that summer together, living through the searches that were done in the middle of the night when the officers would appear in the dorm wearing helmets and carrying nightsticks. They made us stand by our beds as they turned them upside down, looking for contraband, including money, cigarettes, drugs, and everything else that wasn't allowed. And each of us was searched personally, one by one. After the first search, I looked around, and I felt the sense of what it's like to see the aftermath of a natural disaster. As I looked out at the devastation and the disorder that was created by the officers' work, I cried the first time to myself, because after all, tears and fear are not good things to show others when in prison. Aaliyah watched me as I lost 14 pounds in the first 6 weeks. And she was concerned. You see, I have Crohn's disease, and I was diagnosed at 11. And after 25 years of suffering from this debilitating disease of the digestive system, I beat it nearly 10 years ago by changing my diet, my exercise routines, my sleep schedule, and my mindset. Now, Rikers Island did nothing to support me with this condition except provide sleep deprivation, provide me with an environment and an atmosphere of intimidation, 1 optional hour a day of recreation out in the cement yard, food I couldn't digest, and an environment carefully crafted to instill fear and anxiety. It's not really good for a Crohn's disease patient or anybody else. When we found out that soy milk was available in the prison, I had a glimmer of hope. See, I can't eat dairy. And I fought my way to learn how to get to the nutritionist so I could get this permission slip so that the kitchen would give it to me. And after I went through the convoluted process of getting an appointment in the medical clinic, the nutritionist said to me, "You're not going to be here for very long. You're going to have to learn to survive." And she wouldn't give me the slip. Now, Aaliyah and I worked in the garden. And in the garden at Rikers, everybody has to have a job as a sentenced inmate. Now, this is really important because I made 39 cents an hour when I was at Rikers. And I actually found something to eat in the garden there. I ate from the apricot tree, and I ate from the vegetables we were allowed to pick. And I even got a certificate as an apprentice gardener from the Horticultural Society of New York, who runs the program at Rikers in the garden. Now, I'm a writer, so I kept writing about my experiences there. And it upset Aaliyah when the other inmates would interrupt me, you see. And one day I was writing, and Aaliyah ripped a piece of paper off her notepad and she put it in front of me, and it was facing out, and it said, "Do not disturb while I'm writing. Come back when I'm finished." I read it, and I loved it, and I thanked her. I taught Aaliyah the prayer of Jabez. It's a prayer for peace and a request for guidance from above. And every night before the guards would turn off the lights, we would do this prayer on our beds, sitting cross-legged, saying it softly out loud together and doing the following movements. "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, that your hand will be with me, and you'll keep me from harm and evil. Everything you put under my care, O Lord, take it and enlarge it, take it and enlarge it, take it and enlarge it. O God and King, please expand my opportunities and my impact in such a way that I touch more lives for your glory. Let me do more for you." It created such a sense and a moment of peace in that dormitory in those times. Now, Aaliyah and I discussed poetry from a book that I had received that was about change and life and choices. This was so important because what happened was I had been on the inmate council meeting, which is something that I started attending to use my voice and speak up and risk being heard. I talked about officer appreciation boxes instead of officer complaint boxes, and about getting a real self-esteem and self-worth program in that prison. And when I actually got the chance to talk about it at the direction of the warden, of the deputy warden, Aaliyah couldn't believe it. Now, Aaliyah's birthday was in September, just a couple of weeks before I left, and her husband didn't show up. And she turned to me and she said, "You know, Jennifer, I deserve better. I deserve more. I deserve to have a husband who shows up and celebrates my birthday with me no matter where I am." And I told her, yes, she did. On the night before I left Rikers, Aaliyah gave me back The Alchemist. She had finished it, and she loved it. And then she extended her hand with another book that had a piece of paper sticking out of it with a note inside. She said that she wanted me to have it, and it was a gift. Now, the gift that Aaliyah gave me was not the gift that money can buy. It was one of the greatest gifts she could have given. You see, she gave me her Quran, the sacred book that she read from every day, with a note inside. She wanted me to have it. When I left the next day and went through the process of leaving, I realized I had been incarcerated for 120 days, the exact time it takes for the body to regenerate every cell. I continued to be successful as a writer and author, a radio show host, and a consultant for others, and one who encourages other people to share their lives with one another so that we can learn from each other. You see, I'll never have your life experience, and God willing, you'll never have mine. But the thing that I know is that if we share our lives with one another, we can learn from each other, just like Aaliyah and I did that summer at Rikers. Now, I know a lot of people in their lives that I have met and I've spoken with who feel like prisoners of their own lives. They don't need to go to Rikers Island to feel what it's like to be imprisoned. For me, look, the Sixth Amendment says in the Constitution of the United States that I have the right to have an attorney of my choice to represent me. And even though this was pushed aside by the judge in my case and the legal system that I trusted, what I learned from my personal history and my experiences is that if I want to be free, it's up to me. What I know is that it is my and yours God-given right to be fabulous and remain fabulous always. That's why I say to myself all the time, every day, and I teach it to other people to help them with their lives. No matter who you are, and no matter what situation, circumstance, or condition you may find yourself in, you have the right to remain fabulous, and you have the right to feel and be free. Thank you.